This lake is turquoise, the color of a swimming pool in a luxury resort ad. Except there's no resort, there's no filter, there's nothing but glacial rock flour suspended in meltwater at 1,885 meters above sea level in the Canadian Rockies, scattering sunlight into a color so unreal, most people think they know what Canada looks like. Moose, hockey rinks, maybe Niagara Falls. Here's what most people miss. Canada is the second largest country on Earth, spanning approximately 9.98 million square kilometers and 6 time zones. It has more lakes than every other country in the world combined. 3 mountain ranges, ancient boreal forest covering nearly half the landmass, coastline on 3 separate oceans. The version most people picture is maybe 1% of what's actually there. In this video, we move through different destinations, from the most accessible alpine corridors in North America to coastlines that require a float plane and a week to reach. Let's get into it. Moraine Lake sits in the Valley of the 10 Peaks at 1,884 meters above sea level. It's fed entirely by glacial meltwater and snowmelt. It doesn't reach full water level until mid-June, which is why the color is most intense in summer and early fall. The water sits somewhere between ultramarine and teal, with a luminosity that makes it look lit from underneath. The particles responsible are glacial flour, small enough to stay suspended in the water column and scatter light in specific wavelengths. The result is a color so consistent and vivid that first-time visitors routinely assume it's been edited in post-production. Lake Louise, 14 kilometers away, presents a different kind of alpine beauty, more formal, more architectural. The Victoria Glacier provides a stark white backdrop to the aqua blue water, and for hikers willing to push past the crowds, the trail up to Lake Agnes leads to a historic tea house perched at high altitude with views across Mount Fairview and Mount Victoria that most day visitors never see. Then there's Peyto Lake, shaped like a wolf's head when seen from above, with a startlingly bright teal color that's even more saturated than Moraine Lake due to heavier glacial sediment. The viewpoint at Bow Summit, the highest point on the Icefields Parkway accessible by road, gives you a full panoramic view of the Rocky Mountain Trench that is genuinely difficult to process at human scale. The Icefields Parkway itself, 232 kilometers of road connecting Banff and Jasper, is consistently cited as one of the most scenic drives in the world. It's a continuous panorama of ancient glaciers, jagged summits, and valleys carved over millions of years. Midway along the route, in Jasper National Park, Maligne Lake holds Spirit Island, a small grove of trees surrounded by emerald water and framed by 3 distinct mountain ranges. It's accessible only by boat, which is part of why it became one of the most iconic images in Canadian photography. At the southern end of the Icefields Parkway, the Columbia Icefield is the largest accumulation of ice south of the Arctic Circle and the hydrological apex of North America. Water from here drains to 3 separate oceans. Johnston Canyon, closer to Banff townsite, offers waterfalls and unique rock formations accessible via suspended walkways built into the canyon walls. In winter, those falls freeze into massive ice columns. The Vermilion Lakes, just outside town, catch the last light of the day on the western face of Mount Rundle, a location that has been photographed more times than probably any other spot in the Rockies. Banff National Park is 6,641 square kilometers. It was established in 1885 as Canada's first national park. It sits within a UNESCO World Heritage Site that also includes Jasper, Kootenay, and Yoho. The ecosystem is functional and intact. Grizzly bears, wolves, elk, and wolverines all live here. Mount Robson is the highest peak in the Canadian Rockies at 3,954 meters. Unlike most famous mountains that get partially hidden by surrounding terrain, Robson rises so abruptly from its base that you can see nearly the entire mountain from the trailhead in a single frame. The Berg Lake Trail is 22 kilometers one way. you gain almost 800 meters of elevation. Along the route, you pass through 6 distinct ecological zones: riverside forest, open subalpine meadow, and eventually a glaciated landscape that has no real equivalent in southern Canada. Kinney Lake is the first major stop, about 9 kilometers in. The water is that same glacial turquoise from the opening shot, fed by snowmelt and runoff, colored by suspended sediment so fine it only reflects the shorter wavelengths of light. Keep going and the trail enters the Valley of 1,000 Falls. That name is not an exaggeration. The valley walls are steep cliffs, and depending on the season, dozens of waterfalls cascade down them simultaneously. In spring, when snowmelt is at its peak, some of these falls are hundreds of meters tall. The payoff is Berg Lake itself. The Berg Glacier is one of the few glaciers in British Columbia still large enough to carve icebergs directly into a lake. These icebergs, some the size of cars, float across the surface and wash up on the shore. The sound they make when they shift and crack is somewhere between thunder and the groan of old wood. Behind the lake, Mount Robson's face drops almost vertically into the water. When you're standing on the shore looking up at that wall of rock and ice, the mountain is large enough and close enough that it creates its own weather. Clouds form around the summit, while the lake shore below stays completely clear. Berg Lake Trail is the kind of place that resets your internal sense of scale. Most people who've done it say the same thing. They weren't prepared for how big everything was. Haida Gwaii is a group of islands off the northern coast of British Columbia, about 130 kilometers from the mainland. There is no road connection. You get there by ferry, by float plane, or not at all. It's sometimes called the Galapagos of the North. And for once, that kind of comparison actually holds up. The Haida people have lived on these islands for at least 12,500 years, making this one of the longest continuously inhabited places in North America. When you're walking through this forest, you're in a landscape that has been home to the same culture and the same ecological stewardship for over 12 millennia. Gwaii Harnas, the National Park Reserve and Haida Heritage Site, covering the southern third of the archipelago, covers 1,470 square kilometers of land and sea. The name means Islands of Beauty in the Haida language. The trees are old-growth Sitka spruce and red cedar, some over 1,000 years old. The trunks are 3-4 meters in diameter. They're enormous in a way that shifts how you understand the word old. The coastline is equally dramatic. Sea stacks, sea arches, caves carved by Pacific surf, and tidal pools dense with sea stars, anemones, and urchins. Humpback whales and orcas feed offshore. Haida Gwaii black bears, a subspecies found only here, move through the forest. To the east, the broader coastline of British Columbia transitions into the Great Bear Rainforest, one of the largest remaining tracts of unspoiled temperate rainforest in the world. Its network of fjords, glacier-fed streams, and ancient cedar stands is home to the spirit bear, a white-furred black bear, a genetic variant found almost exclusively in this region. The Great Bear Rainforest and Haida Gwaii together form a coastal wilderness corridor that has no equivalent anywhere in the temperate world. Back in Gwaii Harnas itself, there are no roads, no cell service. Access is by boat or kayak only, and every visitor must attend an orientation with a Haida watchman, a cultural guardian stationed at key heritage sites throughout the park. Esgang Gwaii, the southernmost accessible site, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's an ancient Haida village where mortuary and memorial poles still stand, weathered, lichen-covered, slowly returning to the earth. Parks Canada has deliberately chosen not to restore them because the Haida perspective is that the poles returning to the earth is part of the cycle, not a loss. That philosophy runs through everything here. You're not looking at scenery. You're inside a living system that has been tended and understood for longer than most civilizations have existed. Virginia Falls is 96 meters tall. Niagara Falls is 57 meters. Virginia Falls is almost twice the height, sits in the middle of one of the most remote river canyons in North America, and most people in Canada have never heard of it. Nahanni National Park Reserve is in the Northwest Territories, about 500 kilometers west of Yellowknife, accessible by float plane only. It was one of the first 4 UNESCO World Heritage Sites ever designated. In 1978, the same year as the Galapagos Islands and the Great Barrier Reef. The South Nahanni River runs through the park for 300 kilometers, passing through 4 canyons, each deeper than the last. The deepest, First Canyon, has walls that rise over a kilometer from the river surface. The geological explanation for this is unusual. The South Nahanni is an antecedent river, meaning it was flowing before the mountains around it formed. It cuts downward fast enough to keep pace with the land rising around it, which is why you end up with a river running through canyon walls it essentially carved in real time as the mountains grew. The park also contains Rabbit Kettle Hot Springs, a tufa mound 27 meters tall and 60 meters across, built up over centuries by mineral-rich water depositing calcium carbonate. It's one of the largest tufa structures in Canada, and it's still growing. Nahanni is the kind of place that produces the stories people tell for the rest of their lives. A canyon deeper than the Grand Canyon in sections, a waterfall twice the height of Niagara, and almost nobody else around. That combination exists in very few places on Earth. The Cabot Trail is a 298-kilometer road loop around the northern tip of Cape Breton Island. It's consistently listed among the top scenic drives in the world, and unlike the Icefields Parkway, which is famous internationally, the Cabot Trail is still largely under the radar outside Atlantic Canada. Cape Breton Highlands National Park sits at the northern end of the loop. The terrain is a highland plateau, a piece of the ancient Appalachian mountain system extending into the sea, cut by deep river canyons called glens that drop to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. In autumn, from mid-September through mid-October, the hardwood forest covering these highlands turns. Sugar maple goes orange and red. Yellow birch goes gold. American beech goes copper. The colors move in waves as temperature drops at higher elevations first. On a clear October day from the right vantage point, the cliff edge drops to the Atlantic and the forest behind you runs every warm color in the spectrum. The Cabot Trail passes through Cheticamp, an Acadian fishing community that has maintained its French dialect and culture since the 1700s, and through several Mi'kmaq communities with deep historical ties to the region. This is not just a scenic drive, it's a living cultural landscape. Pilot whales, minke whales, and bald eagles are regularly sighted along this coast. The Skyline Trail, a 9-kilometer loop inside Cape Breton Highlands National Park, ends at a suspended boardwalk over a cliff edge at sunset, one of the most reliable spots in Nova Scotia to watch pilot whales feeding in the water directly below you. Cape Breton doesn't get the international profile that British Columbia or Alberta do. But the combination of dramatic coastal geology, intact Acadian and Mi'kmaq cultural identity, and some of the best autumn color in North America makes this one of the most layered destinations on this list. It rewards slowing down. The Torngat Mountains run along the boundary between Quebec and Labrador at the northern tip of the province. The name comes from the Inuktitut word Torngat, meaning place of spirits. The Labrador Inuit and Innu have considered this landscape sacred for thousands of years. This is the oldest mountain range in North America. The rocks here are over 1 billion years old, among the oldest exposed rock on the surface of the planet. The peaks rise directly from the Labrador Sea in fjords carved by glaciation over multiple ice ages. At their tallest, these peaks reach 1,652 meters and drop almost vertically into fjords 300 meters deep. There are no roads into Torngat Mountains National Park. Access is by charter flight or boat from Nain, Labrador. The park operates a base camp on the coast, and it exists partly for logistics and partly because polar bear density in this region is among the highest in the country. Guides carry firearms. moving outside camp boundaries without an escort is strongly discouraged. The landscape above 100 meters is Arctic tundra. No trees, sparse vegetation, exposed rock, lichen, and dwarf shrubs. The color palette is unlike anywhere else in Canada. Burnt orange tundra, gray-white quartzite, black ocean water, white sea ice that lingers into summer. In late August and September, the northern lights appear above the fjords on clear nights. The combination of dark sky, extreme relief, and aurora is the kind of thing that doesn't translate into preparation. You either experience it or you don't. By every account from the people who have, it's extraordinary. The Bay of Fundy, shared between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, holds a distinction that sounds impossible until you watch it happen. The highest tides on Earth. The difference between low and high tide here reaches 16 meters in some locations. That's roughly a 5-story building of water moving in and out twice a day. At Hopewell Rocks, that tidal force has carved something extraordinary. The rocks here are massive sea stacks, some 15 meters tall, sculpted by centuries of tidal erosion into narrow columns that widen at the top, capped with trees. They're known as the flower pot rocks. At low tide, you walk on the ocean floor between them. 6 hours later, the same rocks are surrounded by several meters of water, and kayakers are paddling around their tops. The same geography, 2 completely different experiences on the same day? The Fundy Trail Parkway extends the experience along the coast with 20 lookout points, waterfalls dropping to the shore below, and a suspension bridge over a deep coastal canyon. It's largely unknown outside the region, which means the crowds that Hopewell Rocks draws in peak season thin out almost immediately once you move past the main site. The geology here is as old as anything on this list. The rock faces at Hopewell date back hundreds of millions of years, and they contain some of the richest fossil records in North America. In fact, the Bay of Fundy coastline has produced some of the earliest known reptile fossils ever found. The Bay of Fundy is fascinating for its dynamic landscape that changes completely, twice a day, every single day. The west coast of Vancouver Island is where the Pacific Ocean meets one of the last ancient temperate rainforests on Earth. The trees, Sitka spruce, western red cedar, Douglas fir, are old, large, and dense in a way that feels less like a forest and more like a structure. The canopy blocks enough light that the forest floor exists in permanent green semi-darkness. Pacific Rim National Park Reserve contains 3 distinct units: Long Beach, the Broken Group Islands, and the West Coast Trail. Long Beach is one of the longest stretches of wild Pacific beach in Canada. 16 kilometers of black sand, grey driftwood, and cold surf accessible by road. It's particularly striking during winter storm watching season, when swells generated thousands of kilometers out in the Pacific arrive at full force. Waves reach heights that make standing on the beach feel genuinely precarious. The West Coast Trail runs 75 kilometers along the southwestern edge of Vancouver Island. It was originally built as a telegraph line and rescue route for shipwrecked sailors. This stretch of coast was historically known as the Graveyard of the Pacific. Over 50 ships went down in these waters between 1800 and 1920. The trail takes 5 to 8 days to complete. It involves ladder climbs, down cliff faces, cable car river crossings, suspended boardwalks over tidal zones, and extended sections of boulder scrambling at low tide. The difficulty is real, but the payoff is a coastline with no road access. Sea caves, waterfalls dropping directly onto the beach, tidal pools the size of rooms, and old-growth forest growing to within meters of the ocean. If Berg Lake Trail changes your sense of mountain scale, the West Coast Trail changes your sense of what a coastline can be. This is a shore that has been absorbing Pacific storms for millennia. The trees are shaped by it. The rock is carved by it. The whole landscape is an ongoing exchange between ocean and forest that has been running without interruption for a very long time. Every other location on this list is defined by geology or wilderness. This one is defined by time and the question of what it looks like when a human settlement is old enough to become part of a landscape. Quebec City is the only walled city north of Mexico. Its fortifications are a National Historic Site and among the best preserved examples of colonial military architecture in North America. The walls were built by the French in the 17th century, reinforced by the British after 1759, and they're still standing, fully intact, walkable, surrounding a living city. The aesthetic of Old Quebec, the Vieux Quebec, is European in a way that is genuine, not reconstructed. Cobblestone streets, stone houses, steep staircases connecting the upper town to the lower town, and the Chateau Frontenac rising above it all. The chateau, built by the Canadian Pacific Railway in 1893, is reportedly the most photographed hotel in the world. Whether that's true or not, the sight of it, grey-green copper roofs, turreted silhouette against the St. Lawrence, is immediately legible as an image. It reads as monumental. The Dufferin Terrace boardwalk runs along the cliff top beneath the chateau, with views across the St. Lawrence River and the surrounding plains that in winter are covered in snow for months at a time. Below, the Quartier Petit Champlain is the oldest commercial district in North America. Narrow streets, local artisan shops, the kind of scale that forces you to slow down. Quebec City belong is visually extraordinary, not despite its age, but because of it. The 17th century fortifications, the 18th century stone houses, the 19th century railway hotel, they've accumulated on top of each other in a way that most North American cities were never allowed to do. The result is something that takes genuine effort to believe is on this continent. And in winter, when the St. Lawrence freezes along its edges and the upper town is buried in snow, but the chateau is lit against a dark sky, it becomes something else entirely. The Carnaval de Quebec, the largest winter carnival in the world, uses the city itself as its venue. The streets, the fortifications, the terrace, all of it becomes part of the event. That's what happens when infrastructure is old enough to become culture. The tablelands in Gros Morne National Park look like the surface of Mars. NASA has used this terrain for planetary rover testing because it's a sufficiently accurate analog. The reason is geological. The tablelands are composed of peridotite, mantle rock, thrust to the surface during a continental collision roughly 480 million years ago. Peridotite is chemically toxic to most plant life, which is why a bare orange mountain sits surrounded by green Newfoundland forest. The geology made the landscape. Gros Morne became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987 specifically for its geological significance. The rocks here provided key evidence that confirmed the theory of plate tectonics. This mountain is, in a literal sense, proof of how the Earth works. Western Brook Pond, technically a landlocked fjord cut off from the sea after the land rebounded from glacial weight, is 16 kilometers long and surrounded by cliff walls over 600 meters high. Those walls rival the fjords of Norway for sheer scale. The water is clean enough to drink without treatment. Boat tours run its full length through the summer, and the experience of moving through that corridor of rock with no exit visible ahead and the walls rising vertically on both sides is one of the more disorienting spatial experiences on this list. About 150 kilometers off the Newfoundland coast, Fogo Island adds a different dimension entirely. It's accessible by ferry, and it offers something increasingly rare, a remote island community that hasn't been abandoned. The Fogo Island Inn, a piece of architecture that sits on stilts on the rocky coastline, blending traditional boat-building design with contemporary form, has made the island internationally known to a certain kind of traveler. But the island's deeper draw is Iceberg Alley. From spring through early summer, massive icebergs carve off Greenland's glaciers, drift south on the Labrador Current, and pass within sight of the island's fishing villages. Colourful houses, grey rock, North Atlantic horizon, and a cathedral-scale iceberg drifting past. It's not a combination you find anywhere else. Gros Morne and Fogo Island together cover the full range of what makes Newfoundland visually extraordinary. The ancient and the living, the geological and the human, the dramatic and the quietly strange. Canada's beauty isn't concentrated in one region or one type of landscape. This list covers 10 places. Canada contains thousands more. What it represents is a starting point, a cross-section of what this country looks like when it's at its most visually and geologically remarkable. Whether that's a glacial lake in Alberta, a billion-year-old fjord in Labrador, or a walled city on the St. Lawrence, the hope is that this video leaves you with a clearer, fuller picture of what Canada actually contains, beyond the postcards, beyond the popular stops, and well beyond what most visitors ever reach. If you've enjoyed this video, subscribe for more and hit the notifications icon. Would you be visiting any of these places? Let us know in the comments.